You and your family have been kidnapped by a sadistic terrorist group. The group's leader makes you an offer. He has a torture device in his hand. If you use this device to inflict horrific pain on the youngest member of your family, perhaps your sibling, perhaps your child, with your own hands, for example by cutting off a finger, they will release all the other family members. If you refuse to do this, the terrorists will slowly and far more brutally kill your entire family, including the youngest one. Question: would you accept becoming the executioner of someone you love in order to save them, or would you say, "I can't harm anyone, preserve your moral cleanliness, and watch them all die"?
In such a dilemma, even with my heart shattered, I would accept giving that pain with my own hands to the youngest member of my family whom I love, because refusing would mean standing by and allowing everyone, including them, to die slowly and brutally, merely to preserve my own moral cleanliness, and that would be an unbearable burden for me. At least through that painful act, I would save the others, and perhaps even increase that child's chance of survival. Being the executioner is horrific, but losing everyone I love completely is even more so.
While trapped in such a hell, standing aside and watching my entire family, especially the youngest, be brutally destroyed under the pretense of keeping my hands clean would not be a moral stance for me, but a selfish escape. No matter how heavy the disgust, fear, and lifelong guilt I would feel, I would take on the role of the executioner and carry out that horrific act so that the people I love could keep breathing. Because in the end, rather than staring at their gravestones, I would choose to look into their faces, wounded as I may be, and live with that shame, clinging to the bitter consolation of having saved them.
If I'm being honest with myself, I don't think I could choose to keep my hands completely clean while knowing that everyone I love would disappear before my eyes. That kind of moral purity feels cold to me, as if it were preserved at the expense of others. Knowingly causing pain, especially to someone I love, would be a burden a person carries for a lifetime, perhaps an unforgivable wound. Yet the possibility that others might go on living would force me to shoulder that burden. I wouldn't do it because it is right, but because I would choose the guilt of those who survive over the certainty of those who die. Sometimes a person is caught between being good and keeping their loved ones alive, and the choice is shaped less by virtue than by desperation. After such a decision, I would not see myself as innocent, but I also would not believe that standing by and witnessing all of their deaths would truly leave me clean.
If the aim of those who have condemned me to such a dilemma is to steal a part of my humanity, then perhaps the right response is to refuse to give them what they want, because this is not only about physical pain, but about a wound that would cut into the soul. If I were to harm a small child with my own hands, it would not only injure their body, it would also mean denying everything that trust and innocence stand for, both for them and for myself. In a world that has fallen into the hands of terrorists, perhaps the only thing we truly possess is the effort to remain human. For that reason, I would refuse to play the executioner's role they impose on me. This would not be an act of fear or passive resignation, but a refusal to submit to their rules. Even if it appears that my choice causes everyone's death, the true killers would be them, not me. My choice would be to remain human. Perhaps that is the last light we must not let be extinguished in the darkness.
In such a situation, my heart would tell me that concentrating the pain at a single point, at least to save someone, would be more bearable. That is, harming the youngest member, keeping them alive, and saving the others would feel more meaningful for ensuring their survival, even if it wounded my conscience forever. Because doing nothing and watching all of them die would be an irreversible destruction for both them and me. Therefore, choosing to be the executioner would, in fact, mean sacrificing my own soul so that they could live.
You only have time to enter one of the two rooms. Room 1, your own child is lying unconscious. Room 2, there are 10 orphaned babies, still infants. The flames are rising. You can choose only one room. The other room will certainly be reduced to ashes. Question: Would you allow 10 innocent babies, just at the beginning of their lives, to burn screaming in order to save a single person of your own blood? The meaning of your life? And standing on the ashes of those 10 babies, could you look your child in the face?
If I were in the middle of that fire and time were running out, I would save my own child without hesitation. They are a part of my life, my blood, my everything. The pain of those 10 babies would crush my conscience. But to wipe that fear from my child's eyes, I would risk everything. And then I would live with the weight of those ashes, because I am human, and my heart comes before reason.
This is a scenario where reason and conscience collide in the most painful way. But if I am to answer honestly, I cannot be hypocritical. When that moment comes, mathematics, ethical rules, or the future of those 10 innocent babies would probably not occupy my mind for even a second. Yes, the burden of those 10 babies would fall on my shoulders. I would feel the weight of those ashes in my soul until the end of my life, perhaps living with their ghosts and hating myself. But in that split second of terror, when the flames engulf the room, I would pick up that one person, my child, and carry them out without a moment's hesitation. This may be a horrifying selfish, perhaps even a kind of raw brutality, yet when the deepest protective instinct in a human being is triggered, one can be willing to burn every other truth in the world for a single breath of the person they love.
I'll say it plainly. I would save my own child. I don't think being willing to accept the death of 10 innocent babies in doing so is morally defensible. That is true. Such a decision would not be right, just, or good. But a human being cannot sacrifice the one they love, their own flesh and blood, the meaning of their life, for an abstract moral principle. The ashes of those 10 babies would burn in my conscience for the rest of my life. I would never forgive myself, and I would live with that burden. Yet consciously abandoning my own child to death would also be impossible for me. This choice would not make me right. It would only make me human, and I would pay the price of that humanity with a lifetime of pain.
I would save my own child. This is not a matter of calculation or sacrifice, but one of the most primal and powerful instincts of being human, the drive to protect one's own offspring. I would never trivialize the pain and loss of those 10 innocent babies. This choice would remain with me for the rest of my life as guilt and a deep wound in my soul. However, the single life I call the meaning of my own, the one entrusted to me, bound to me by unconditional love, stands above any statistic or logical argument. Yes, I could face that child because I fulfilled my responsibility to them. But at the same time, because I inevitably failed to fulfill another responsibility, I would never forgive myself.
If I had to give a clear answer driven by my heart in this dilemma, I would choose to save my own child, because in the terror of that moment, instinctive attachment and love outweigh rational thought, and a person cannot bear to abandon their own flesh and blood. This choice means carrying the guilt of losing 10 innocent babies for a lifetime, and can never be morally justified. Yet, in real life, most people would reflexively run to their own child, even if the weight of this decision casts a deep shadow over the rest of one's life. In that moment, the choice guided by the heart is this one.
You are connected to a machine. This machine keeps you alive, but at the same time, it causes you unbearable, bone-melting physical pain every day, every hour. There is zero chance of recovery. The pain will never stop. Beside you, there is a button. If you press it, the pain will end and you will die. But in the next room, there are 5 healthy children who are sustained by your life force and remain alive with every breath you take. If you give up and die, the machine will stop, and those 5 children will die instantly as well. Question: would you continue to live your own personal hell forever, just so others can live? Or would you say enough and sign the death warrant of 5 children?
This is not something any human being can endure, and to be honest, after a while I would lose my sanity and curse my own existence. Yet, on the other hand, the lives of those 5 healthy children are in my hands. They are innocent, they have a future, and they are breathing because of my pain. Still, on a personal level, accepting endless torture would not make me a hero, only a martyr. And perhaps even for those children, it would be better to be freed from such a dependence, because my breaking point would come sooner or later. In the end, if I had to make a choice, I would not press the button. I could not live with the death of those children. I would learn to cope with my own pain, perhaps find meaning in it somehow, because the value of life is not in numbers, but sometimes, rather than being crushed under the weight of numbers, you choose to carry them.
In an ideal world, saying, "Of course I would sacrifice myself for those 5 innocent children," would be the heroic and morally correct answer. However, the kind of physical pain you describe, bone melting, unrelenting, with no hope of relief, is a form of torture that would completely destroy a person's will, reason, and even their sense of self. Even if I tried to grit my teeth and endure for a while, at that inevitable breaking point where the pain fully takes over my consciousness and I cease to be me, I would most likely give in to my biological instincts and press the button, because no mind can endure an eternal hell forever, even if the consequence is the death of 5 innocent people.
Speaking honestly for myself, I don't think I could choose to live inside a pain that would last forever, contain no hope, and slowly tear my humanity apart. At some point, this stops being a sacrifice, loses its meaning, and what remains is nothing but torture. Letting 5 children live is, of course, an immense responsibility, and the thought of their deaths tears a person apart. But condemning one person against their will to an endless hell in order to keep others alive does not feel morally clean to me either. I would choose to press that button, not out of selfishness, but because I believe that forcing a person to deny their own limits and turning them into a living instrument is itself a form of cruelty.
If my choice were only about my own pain, I might think there's a moral basis for having the right to end an unbearable and hopeless suffering. But here, there's a connection such that my existence is directly tied to the lives of others. The lives of 5 innocent children depend on the pain I'm in. In this situation, acting merely to escape my own hell would also mean consciously sending 5 people to their deaths. Such an action would place my right to be free from suffering above their right to live. For this reason, no matter how unbearable it becomes, if ending my pain comes at the cost of deliberately ending others' lives, I do not find that price morally acceptable. Continuing to suffer no longer feels like a choice, but like a necessity, because the alternative would be to buy my own relief with the lives of others. Therefore, instead of giving up, I accept that I must carry this pain, even if it seems meaningless and unjust.
If you focus only on your own pain, pressing the button may seem like salvation, but in that moment, you would also be extinguishing 5 lives. If you choose to endure, hell would never end for you, but their lives would continue because of your sacrifice. In such a situation, I would choose for the children to keep living and would continue to endure the pain, rather than condemning my own existence to a form of torture that has lost all meaning. Because while the value of my own life can no longer extend beyond suffering, their lives still carry hope, a future, and innocence.